Essential Forms and Migrations at the Smith College Museum of Art, provided with a space 32 by 66 feet with movable walls, I created 4 unique spaces that were experienced in succession, as if they were places found while traveling through a vast landscape. To enter the piece, people walked shoeless on a slick black floor covered with black sand. At each site, they found objects whose spatial orientation, combined with the lighting or lack of it, their color, and the sound of viewers' footsteps, all played on their perceptions, changing their sense of scale and location. Although these objects were intriguing or compelling in and of themselves, in a sense they were beside the point, as their primary importance was to mark an internal topography, a topography of the mind, whose atmosphere was palpable. In this first room, 13 blue hydrocal forms sat at floor level. Their intense color resulted from adding dyes directly into the hydrocal mix, which was then cast and formed in cheesecloth. As the forms dried, subtle variations of color continued to emerge. Lit sparely, the light seemed to emanate from within these forms, whose references ranged from stepping stones to rushing water frozen in midair to the flowing drapery of Renaissance paintings. They were also pockets that held actual water, providing an atmosphere of strange but quiet contemplation. Following a path through the blue pools, one turned and entered a dark, narrow passage, 4 by 15 feet, marked at the end by a tower of nylon sacks filled with black sand. Like stones or giant larvae, these sacks slumped under each other's weight, holding sheets of glass that protected deep blue and bright white cloud images. Built on site, the weight of this piece anchored the corner. On touching, there were sounds of sifting sand. Looking ahead, a white sphere appeared to float on the horizon, marking the next expanse of space, the longest passage of the journey, approximately 37 feet long. Although slightly more illuminated, this passage had an uneasy feeling, as if one would not know quite where to be. The beginning and end having been marked, the only choice was to wander on the black sand, eventually coming to look down on a portion of floor gridded with stacks of glass. Some of these stacks contained within them another image of cloud and sky, this one soft and muted, its tones of pale green varying according to the layers of glass that weighted it down. This repeated image, made with color Xerox copies, ironically referred to and inverted the feeling of a Baroque ceiling. Quietly, the clouds had come to rest on the floor, much like the pools of water in the previous room. Pulled on by the white object, its true ovoid shape was revealed. About 3 feet high, concrete and wire at its core, this form was wrapped and knotted with one continuous length of white tissue paper. Suggestive of both swaddling and shrouding, it served as a pivot point between the dark spaces with black floor and the completely white atmosphere ahead. This fourth location, which comprised 1/3 of the total space, was shaped by 37 10-foot by 30-inch panels suspended from the ceiling to just above the floor. Constructed horizontally, then hung, these panels were made by pouring plaster between 2 layers of cheesecloth and embedding sheets of 6-inch square steel grid. The panels articulated an architectural space based on floor plans of medieval churches. Passages were proportioned on the number 9, believed in medieval numerology to have spiritual significance. The steel rusted naturally into the plaster, causing a golden grid to appear, at times deeply embedded, causing undulating pillows of fleshy plaster, at times a unifying linear pattern, at times bare and threatening spikes. Through a fragment of an octagonal apse, one reached the deepest part of the installation and could look back through all preceding layers. The cheesecloth, interacting with the steel and plaster, varied from being a taut containing skin to a translucent diaphanous veil. At times it seemed to trail like a skirt, ruffle like drapery, or be squeezed or seemingly tortured. The panels were at once elements of an ethereal and heavenly architecture, as well as elongated pendulous bodies compressed in steel fittings. Still aware of the distant sound of footsteps on sand, indicating others moving through earlier parts of the piece, the viewer wandered in the passages of this environment, watching layers, details, and towering forms continue to reveal themselves. It soon became evident that the only way out was to retrace one's steps the entire length of the installation. One of my interests is to transform the act of seeing from a purely optical experience to a physical one. When people respond from the physical body and their senses, unconscious associations are evoked, disrupting predictable assumptions about forms that look familiar but are actually ambiguous and unknown. In leaving the work, linearity was reversed. The end was the beginning the end. Participants perceived forms differently as they encountered them from a new point of view, while holding in their minds the knowledge, memory, and images of the whole. The work did not rest at the level of metaphor, but became a series of events, palpable experiences, which suggested differing and elusive multiple meanings.